Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to try and move past just guessing or, relying on gut feelings about JavaScript variables.
Yeah, definitely. We're aiming to build a really solid mental model for how JavaScript actually handles variable accessibility. We're talking about scope.
Right. Because just copying code snippets without understanding why they work, well, that only gets you so far.
Exactly. If your idea of scope is shaky, you're bound to hit weird bugs later on, especially with things like closures or async stuff.
Okay, so the core idea we're digging into today is lexical scope.
Uh-huh. That's the big one.
Yeah.
It basically means where a variable can be used is decided when the code is first read during like the compilation step.
Before anything actually runs.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's all about where you wrote the code. And we've got some, I think, pretty helpful metaphors to get your thinking lined up with how the JS engine sees it.
All right, let's get into the first one. You mentioned establishing the geography of scope. Something about marbles and buckets.
Yeah, the marbles, buckets, and bubbles idea. It helps visualize the structure.
Okay, walk us through it. How do we picture this?
So think of every variable or function name, every identifier as a marble.
Okay, got it. Marbles.
And then think of each scope, like the global scope or a function scope or even the scope inside an if block as a colored bucket or maybe a bubble.
Different colors for different scopes.
Exactly. And the crucial part is this. A marble's color, which is basically its home scope, is determined by which bucket it's dropped into when it's first declared, where you write var x or let y.
Okay, so let's map this to some code. We always start with the global scope, right? The outermost one.
Right. Let's call that the RE bucket. So if you declare, say, var students out there, or a function get student name, those marble students and get student name go into the RE bucket.
Makes sense. Then inside that get student name function, that creates a new scope.
Yep. That function creates its own scope, a new bucket. Let's call this one the BLUE bucket.
And what goes in the BLUE bucket?
Well, if the function has a parameter, like student ID, that student ID marble lives in the BLUE bucket. Any variables declared directly inside that function, using var, let, or const, also belong in the BLUE bucket.
Okay, red outside BLUE inside the function. What if there's like a loop inside the function, say a for loop?
Good question. If you have a for loop, and maybe inside that loop you declare let student mubber, that loop itself creates another scope, a block scope.
So another bucket.
Another bucket, let's call this one green. The student marble declared with let inside the loop belongs only in that green bucket.
Red, blue, green, nested inside each other.
And that nesting is key. Because scope is lexical based on where you write it, these bubbles or buckets have to be perfectly nested. The green bucket is entirely inside the BLUE bucket, which is entirely inside the red bucket.
They can't overlap partially, like half in blue, half in red.
Never. The compiler figures out these boundaries instantly, based on the code structure. It's rigid.
Okay, that structure makes sense. It's fixed during compilation. But what about when the code runs? How does code, say, in the green bucket, access something from the red bucket?
Oh, that's the lookup rule. Think of it like looking for a marble. If your code is running inside the green bucket.
The innermost one, the loop.
Right. You can look for marbles in its own green bucket. If it doesn't find the variable name there, it automatically looks outward into the containing BLUE bucket.
Okay.
And if it's not in the BLUE bucket either, it keeps going outward up to the next containing bucket, which is the red one.
So you can always look outwards into parent scopes?
Exactly. You can look in your current scope or any scope that contains yours, all the way up to the global scope.
But you can't look inwards, right? Code running in the ready global scope can't just peek into the BLUE or green buckets.
Nope. Access is strictly outwards or within the current scope. You can't look down into nested child scopes.
Gotcha. And you mentioned earlier, this lookup feels like a runtime thing, but the engine actually knows where things are beforehand.
Yeah, that's the efficiency part. While we talk about it as checking the current scope, then the next outer scope, the compiler's already done the hard work. It figured out which marble belongs in which colored bucket before execution. It creates a kind of map.
So the engine isn't actually searching slowly at runtime.
Not really. It's more like following the predetermined map made by the compiler. It's much faster that way.
This split between compilation and execution seems really important. You said it involves 3 key players in the engine.
Absolutely. To really understand how variables come to life, you got to meet the cast. There's the engine, the compiler, and the scope manager.
Okay, who does what?
The engine is the boss during runtime. It executes the code, line by line, following the instructions.
And the compiler?
The compiler works before the engine starts. It takes your JavaScript code, parses it, breaks it into pieces tokenization, and eventually generates instructions the engine can understand. And crucially, it deals with declarations.
Declarations.
Okay,
And the third one, the scope manager.
right, the scope manager. Think of it like this. For every colored bucket, red, blue, green, there's a dedicated scope manager. Its job is to keep track of all the marbles, variables, declared within its specific bucket and enforce the rules about who can access them.
So each scope has its own manager.
Pretty much, yeah. Now let's see how they work together. Take a simple line like var students equals. Seems like one thing happens, right?
Yeah, you declare a variable and give it a value.
But the engine and compiler see it as two distinct steps happening at different times.
Okay, break it down. Step one.
Step one happens during compilation. The compiler sees var students, it pauses, turns to the scope manager for the current scope, let's say it's the global ready scope, and asks, hey scope manager, have you heard of an identifier called students in this bucket?
And what does the scope manager do?
If the scope manager says, nope, never seen it, it then creates that variable declaration in its list for the array. That's the formal declaration. It notes down the name students.
But it doesn't get the array value yet.
Not yet. For var, the scope manager usually initializes it to undefined right away. But the actual assignment, the air part, that waits.
Okay, so declaration happens first during compile time. What's step two?
Step two happens later, during execution. The engine is running the code, and it hits that line, students, the engine takes over. It figures out the value, the array, and then it asks the scope manager, hey, I need to assign this value to students. Where is it?
And the scope manager knows because the compiler already talked to it.
Exactly. The scope manager does a quick lookup in its list, finds students, and tells the engine where it is. The engine then puts the array value into that variable.
Declaration by compiler, assignment by engine. That split explains hoisting, doesn't it?
Perfectly. The declaration, the name registration, is hoisted to the top of its scope because the compiler handles it early. The assignment happens exactly where you wrote it in the code, handled by the engine later.
Okay, let's listen in on that conversation again, but maybe think about let and const. How does that change things, especially with the temporal dead zone?
Right, good point. So compiler sees the code. If it's var teacher, Mrs. Davis's in the global scope.
Compiler asks global scope manager, seen teacher. Manager says no, creates it, initializes it to undefined. Ready to go.
Exactly. Then later, engine assigns Ms. Davis's. Now, what if the compiler sees let grade instead?
Does the compiler still talk to the scope manager?
Yes. Compiler still says, hey, scope manager, I've got a declaration for grade here. The scope manager still registers grade as belonging to its scope. It knows about grade.
But there's a difference, right? The TDZ?
Right. Because it's let, or const, the scope manager puts it in a special state. It's registered, but marked as uninitialized. That's the temporal dead zone.
So the manager knows it exists, but won't let anyone touch it yet.
Precisely. The scope manager will reject any attempt by the engine to read or write to grade until the engine actually executes the line let grade equals 10. Only then does the scope manager flip the switch to initialized.
Ah, so the TDZ isn't some magical zone in the code. It's more like a state the scope manager enforces for let and const variables.
You got it. It prevents you from accessing the variable before its declaration line runs. Unlike var, which just gives you undefined, it forces a more logical top-to-bottom flow for those variables.
Okay, that clarifies the TDZ thing. So compilation sets up the buckets and registers the marbles. Execution assigns values and uses them. But what if the engine needs a marble and it's not in the current bucket? Back to that outward search.
Yeah, the scope chain lookup. Let's use that building metaphor again. Nested scopes are like floors in a building. The current scope is your current floor.
Let's say we're on the third floor, the green scope, inside that for loop, and the code needs the students array, which we said was declared globally.
Okay, so the engine running on the third floor first asks the green scope manager, got students.
Green manager says, nope, not in my bucket.
So the engine takes the elevator up to the second floor, the below scope manager, the function scope, asks again, you got students.
Let's say the function didn't declare its own students. So BLUE manager also says, nope.
Right. Engine keeps going. Takes the elevator to the top floor, the global scope, the red scope manager, asks one last time, got students.
And the red manager says, yep, right here.
Exactly. The search stops, the engine gets the reference to the global students array, and the code continues.
Okay, the upward search makes sense, but what if it gets all the way to the top, the global scope manager, and still gets a nope? The variable just wasn't declared anywhere.
Now we're in lookup failure territory. This is what the source calls the undefined mess, partly because the errors can be confusing.
How so?
Well, First case. The engine was trying to read the value of a variable that was never declared anywhere, a source reference. The lookup fails all the way up. What happens?
It throws an error.
Yes. It always results in a reference error. The message is typically something like XYZ is not defined.
Okay, not defined, but that sounds like undefined the value.
And that's the confusion. Not defined here means was never declared. The scope manager at any level never even heard of it. It's completely different from a variable that was declared but hasn't been assigned a value yet, which holds the actual value undefined.
So reference error X is not defined means undeclared, but if I just check X and it gives me undefined, that means it was declared, just maybe not initialized or assigned yet.
Correct. Two totally different situations. And to make it worse, the type of operator throws a wrench in things.
Oh, how?
If you do type of some variable that was never declared, what do you think it returns?
Based on the confusion, maybe the string undefined.
Bingo. It returns undefined, the exact same string it returns for a variable that is declared but holds the undefined value. It doesn't throw the reference error in that specific case.
Okay, so typef isn't reliable for checking if something is actually declared.
Not really, no. It's a historical quirk. You just have to remember that not defined, the error, means undeclared, while undefined, the value or the type of result, means declared but valueless.
Okay, that's one kind of lookup failure. What about the other one? You mentioned the global trap. Sounds ominous.
It is, or it was, a major source of bugs. This happens when the lookup fails,
Okay.
but the variable was the target of an assignment.
Meaning the code was trying to write to it, like
Yeah.
some undeclared variable, it's a 100.
Exactly. So the engine asks all the scope managers, all the way up to global, hey, where can I put this value for some undeclared variable? And everyone says, nope, never heard of it.
What happens then? Does it throw a reference error?
It depends. And this is crucial. If your code is running in non-strict mode,
Which used to be the default, right?
yeah, and still is if you don't explicitly opt in.
Yeah.
In non-strict mode, the global scope manager, upon hearing the final nope, does something unexpected. It says, oh, well, since you need a place to put this value, I'll just create an undeclared variable for you right here in the global scope.
Whoa. This creates a global variable automatically.
Yes, an accidental global variable. The assignment succeeds, no error is thrown, but you've just polluted the global namespace, possibly overwriting something else or causing really hard to track bugs later.
That sounds terrible. How do we avoid that?
Simple. Use strict mode. Always. Put use strict at the top of your files or modules.
And what does strict mode do in this scenario?
When strict mode is enabled, if the engine tries to assign to an undeclared variable, a failed target reference, the global scope manager does the right thing. It refuses to create the global variable and instead throws the helpful reference error.
So strict mode turns that silent, dangerous behavior into a clear error.
Exactly. It closes the trap. That's why the source material is so emphatic. Always use strict mode. It prevents this legacy behavior and makes your code safer and more predictable.
Okay, so pulling this all together, understanding these internal mechanics, these conversations between engine, compiler, scope manager, what's the big takeaway for someone listening?
Well, I think we've hit on three main conceptual models today. First, scope is lexical. It's set in stone when the code is written, based on where you put your functions and blocks. No magic runtime scope.
Right. Determined at compile time.
Second, processing a variable involves two distinct steps across two different actors. The compiler handles declaring the variable in its scope during compilation. The engine handles assigning a value to it and using it during execution.
The two-phase process, declaration, then assignment execution.
And third, when the engine needs a variable, it looks in the current scope first, then travels outward through the nested scopes, floor by floor, up to the global scope. And failures can lead to reference error or dangerously accidental globals if you're not using strict mode.
Which we absolutely should be using.
Always. End of story.
So having these models in your head means you're not just guessing anymore when you hit a scope issue or work with closures. You can actually trace the logic.
Exactly. You can almost simulate the engine's process in your mind. Okay, compiler sees this let, talks to the current scope manager. Okay, TDZ is active. Now engine runs. Ask scope manager. Okay, now it's initialized. You can reason about it.
And the source had a suggestion for really making this stick, right?
Yeah, and I love this one. Don't just passively absorb this. Find some code you wrote, maybe even today. Sit down and actually talk through it out loud.
Like play the roles. Okay, I'm the compiler now.
Yes, I see var x. Okay, scope manager, register x. Then, okay, now I'm the engine. Execute this line, scope manager, where's x? Doing that active walkthrough, verbalizing the steps for your own code,
Yeah.
that's how you really internalize this framework and stop relying on luck.
That's a great final thought. Actively practice the model. Don't just understand it, use it to analyze code. Fantastic.